for joining us today for this workshop about should you apply to the Ivy League and other selective universities. And before we begin, I'm just going to tell you about who I am. So my name is Wendy Beato, and I'm the college counselor at Varsity Abroad. And I have worked as a counselor in places like New York City, where I grew up, also in Palm Beach, Florida, and lastly in Cape Town, South Africa, where I was the counselor at the American International School before joining and creating my company, Varsity Abroad. And basically, over the last 20 years, I've been helping students apply to universities all over the world. Our students have been accepted to really great universities. If you want to see more in details, you can either go to my social media, whether in LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram. And I do have a list of year by year how they have performed and how well they've done. I am really, really proud of them. And it's also due because of the work that they put in their applications. All right. So today we are going to cover specifically information about undergraduate admissions to the Ivy League. And today we are going to be talking about things like selectivity in universities admissions. We're also going to talk about the Ivy League and other top tier universities in the US. We're also going to look at, well, how do admissions officers review your application? Why is it so hard to get accepted to these universities? And the goal of this presentation is what can you do to stand out against everybody else who is applying, and other more tips. All right, so let's begin with first understanding what does it mean to be in a selective admissions profile. And it means that any university that has a limited amount of seats available each year for their institution will receive a larger number of applications. So they have very, very little seats and way too many applications. And that is basically what it means to be a selective university admissions. Because of this, they tend to have very rigorous admissions processes, which means, SAT scores, essays, supplemental essays, they look at your academics more carefully because they're having to weed out so many applications to make sure that they are picking the best, more diverse class for their institution. That means that they can also have very low acceptance rates. And with that, I actually want to explain this carefully because people need to understand what I mean by low acceptance rates. So I created this little chart to make it very easy and visual. I have created and coined 4 types of acceptance rates. There are your wildcards, your reach, your target, and your likely. Wildcard universities are those who accept less than 10% of their qualified applicants. So it's not that these students should not get accepted. They have everything that they need, but they just get way too many applications. Less than 10% get accepted. So it's kind of like playing the lottery. Reach universities are those who still decline more students that are qualified that they can accept because they just don't have the space. And usually their acceptance rates are between 11% to 35%. Target schools are universities that accept most of their qualified applicants. And I usually think about universities between 36 to 55%. I will say that they are target school. They don't accept everyone, but it is a higher chance of being admitted. And likely schools are those who have accepted most of the students who are qualified. And these are schools that are not just like any random school that you shouldn't go to, but they do have more space and they're able to accommodate their applicants. So anything above 56% and above, to me, is a likely school. So the Ivy League and top-tier universities tend to be in the wildcard and reach area. Many of them in the wildcard, especially your Harvard, MITs, and so on, they tend to be there. And then there are others in the reach. And I always say that even in the reach, there are some that is like 12%, 13%, that even though they're like a little bit higher, it still means that they are declining. Like, let's say someone has a 10% acceptance rate. 90% of the students are being rejected. And it's not because they cannot get accepted, that they're not fantastic. They just have way too many applications. And I'm going to illustrate that in a little bit. So who are the Ivy Leagues? And like we were doing today in the entry talk, these are basically 8 institutions that used to play football, what they still do. But they are also known for their academic excellence because they have really competitive admissions, and also because a lot of influential people and leaders come from having studied at these universities. They are Harvard, Yale, Dartmouth, Cornell, Columbia, Brown, and UPenn. And as you can see, as we were doing in the little chat earlier, no Stanford, nor MIT. That doesn't mean, again, they're just not part of that football league that they're playing with. But it does mean that there's many other universities that have really highly selective acceptance rates and applications. And these are just some of them, like NYU, UCLA, UC Berkeley, Georgetown, Caltech, MIT, Amherst, Stanford, and so more. So there's quite a number of universities that have really selective applications, who also have really great academic programs, considered to be at that level of what we know as the Ivy Leagues and so forth. So what does it mean to get accepted to university in the US? Like, how does this happen? And the one thing is that the process is the same, whether you're applying to a top tier Ivy League university, to another target school like your school and so on. It's going to be the same. It's going to be based on these 5 factors, okay? And these are basically academic factors and individual factors. And this is basically what they're going to ask. In the academic factors, they're going to look at how have you performed in your high school. And in America, the high school is grade 9 to 12. So yes, they are going to look at everything, even grade 9, where you had, whatever courses you were doing and how you performed. They will be looking at that. They're also going to be paying attention to things like academic merits. So what honors do you get? You get any certificates for academic, standing, have colors, ties, blazers, anything that you have been rewarded for being academically fit. They're going to be paying attention to that. They're also going to be looking at standardized tests if you choose to use them. At this point in time, there is such thing as test optional admissions, and most of the universities around are still, some of the Ivy League as well, are going test optional. And what that means is that you do not have to submit SAT or ACT scores as part of the admissions process. It is optional, that you don't have to. If you do submit it, they will look at it. So it's basically they're giving you a choice to do it. It has happened because of COVID that kind of brought that around, and many schools are still instituting that kind of application choice. So if you do apply with your test, basically they're going to be looking at your results as well and comparing them to the other students who have applied. They're also going to look at your activities. So what have you done outside of studying? So what are you bringing to the university besides your brain? Remember that for these universities, everyone's smart. Like, that's a given. You have to be smart. Otherwise, why are you applying to these top schools? But what else have you done? Have you been involved in school? Have you been, part of sports, community service, leadership committees? Have you done job shadowing? Like, what have you done that is going to enrich you as a person and therefore come to the university and enrich them and their culture as well? So really, really important. They're also going to be looking at, what do your teachers have to say about you? So yes, you're going to have to be very nice to your teachers from now, because they're going to be requiring someone to act as a counselor who's going to write a letter about you as a student within the school that you are in. And they're going to need 2 academic teachers' recommendations to talk about you as a student within the classroom. And the last thing in that part is your college essay. And that's basically so they can get an idea of who you are, how you think, and if you're going to be a good fit for the university. All right. So basically, these 5 factors are considered equally. Again, if you're not using your test, then it will be up to the 4 other areas. And for those of you who are thinking about test optional, it means that everything else needs to be top-notch. Because if you're not using tests, then they're going to be heavily relying on your academics and all the other areas. And no, there is not one area that is more important than the other. It is what is called a holistic application approach that they use in the US. And that means is that they look at your academics and they look at the human factors and then basically look at everything together and make a decision to see if you're a good fit. However, these individual factors is where selective admissions are unique. And I'm going to spend some time here so that you understand the difference. The academics for very highly selective universities, they are going to expect you to be academically smart. So you being the top student at your school means that you're going to be the same as every other top student in the world that is applying. So being smart is not going to give you any points or anything different, because so is everybody else applying. Having top academic SAT results or ACT results, again, so many students are applying with 1500s and so on. So again, that is just like a given. Like, this is what we require if you want to even be considered. So you need to make sure that you are at that level just for consideration. It does not give you any additional benefits against anyone else because of the fact that they are all going to be doing basically, they're all at that level. Where you have a chance to stand out is in the individual factors. This is really what is important, is what do you as an individual bring to the plate that the other smart kid who's also applying doesn't have. So that is how you can basically distinguish yourself from the other students that are applying. All right. So moving forward, so why is it so difficult to get accepted into these type of universities? And it has to do, again, like I said, is because of the number of qualified applicants. So totally, they have everything that they need to do over the number of seats that they have available. And this is where I like to talk about something that I coined that is actually kind of a joke, inside joke, is the Kim Kardashian effect. And then let me just explain this. So let's say that Kim Kardashian, who at the moment is quite popular, people know who she is, decides that her daughter, or one of her children, is going to go to best university in Florida, right? So best university is a normal university that has, let's say that they have 1,000 spots every year, and then normally they get around 1,300 applications. So they accept most of their students because it's a kind of like a balanced application. But now Kim Kardashian has gone and be like, oh my God, best university is going to be where I'm going to send my kids, and everybody gets to know about them. And and it turns out that best university is really good. They have good programs, like many universities. That in the US we have like 3,000 universities or more. So there are many, many schools out there. It's not just those 20 or 30 that you know. And all of a sudden, everyone is like, oh my God, we are all applying to Best U, and then Best University next year gets 30,000 applications for the same 1,000 spots. So you see how all of a sudden it looks like, they're so selective, and it's not, they haven't changed. It's just that they're now more popular. So these universities, the Harvard, Stanford, and so on, they're very popular. Yes, they're really good. I'm not saying that they're not, but there are many other universities out there that also just as good and have great academic programs, but they're really popular. So they get many, many applications, and therefore it makes it even more difficult because the more applications they get, the harder it is to get accepted because they still have only those spots. And during COVID specifically, when they removed SAT requirements, they got an influx of applications. I mean, last year, I believe that NYU received 120,000 applications for their campus, which is, you can imagine, like, I feel sorry for the people reading those applications because they do have to get through all of them. So let me show you a graph to illustrate what I'm talking about here. So you have over here, and I just want you to pay attention. I hope that my mouse doesn't take anything away. You have basically the overall applications that they received last year. This is the class of 2027. So they're the people that were the 2022, 2023 class. Let's just take Brown. Brown received 51,000 applications for 2,609 spots. Harvard received 56,937 applications for 1,942. And you can kind of do, basically look at the first two columns, and that lets 68,000 applications at Cornell for 4,994 spots. So you can see the acceptance rate were overall 5% for Brown, 3.9% for Columbia. Well, let's just round it off, 7% for Cornell, 6% for Dartmouth, 3%, 3.4% for Harvard, 5% for UPenn. Princeton has decided for the past 2 years that they are not releasing their information. That's why you cannot find it. Yale was around 4.3%. And you can see how selective they have been because of the amount of applications that they get for such a little amount of seats that they have available. Okay, so we come to the very important part is, so then how do you stand out from all of these, 68,000 applications at one university? And these are the areas that I advise for you to really pay attention to when you are putting together your application. The first one is submit an impressive application. Take the time. You'll be surprised, like attention to detail. Make sure that you're completing your Common App or whatever application you're using well, completely, your activities. Make sure that you're highlighting the things that the values, the skills that you're bringing. Make sure that you're answering things correctly, that you are not spelling things wrong, and that is done fully and completely. So put together with application is like the number one thing. Another way that you can show, stand out is by what is called demonstrated interest. And that is when you actually make an effort to learn more about the university, and they keep track of this. And this can be something as little as doing a campus visit. So if you are able to fly and come see the university, go register with admissions. They take down your details because they keep track of that. They also, let's say that they're having an online webinar, and I usually share this in my newsletter. Join, sign up. You have to put your name and your details. They keep track of seeing who is actually making an effort to learn about us. Sometimes people, email admissions because they have questions. So again, they keep track of your details. Or sometimes they actually visit the country. Like, I have sometimes, they come to South Africa or to wherever you are in your region, and they have a workshop. Go and attend. Sign into the little roster because they keep track of all of that information. And that is how they can see demonstrated interest. And why is that important? Because they don't want to waste a seat on someone who doesn't even make the effort to go. It doesn't mean that it's going to give you like a once up, like, oh my God, if I go, they will know that I went. Many people do visit them, but it just shows interest, that you're making the effort to learn more about them, that it's not just about the brand name, but that you're doing, you're going a little bit the extra mile by doing demonstrated interest. And there's so many ways to do it. So, there's no reason for you not to go to an online webinar or some sort of presentations. Most of them are doing this all the time. You just have to go to the website and find it. Right. Another thing is what they call special projects or passion projects. For my students in South Africa, this actually is quite easy because you guys are so involved in community events and all kinds of things that you have to do anyways because of school, that you kind of have a few things that you do. And what this means is be involved. Do something besides study, and find something that you do and that you do it well and properly. Like, don't try to just be like, oh, I'm going to do a week of community service just so I can put it on my activity, or I'm going to go and play, the piano for one term and then forget it just so I can put it down. Do something that means something to you, because this is going to show up in either a supplemental essay or interview, or something like this. Is do something that you get involved. Find something that you're passionate about and go with it. It just helps you stand out from other students because it shows that you can commit to an activity and really take initiative, depending on what it is that you do. All right. Another thing is, hey, I am actually going to talk about this separately again. Your essays and your supplements. It is the only time that you get to talk. That's it. Everything else is data and, other things, tests and so on. So be very, very careful with your essays and your supplements. Make sure that you use this opportunity to really come across as your most authentic self. The other thing is applying early. If you know that there's a school that you definitely want to go to, consider whether you should be applying in the early round. And I will be talking about that again in more details. Interviews. Many of these universities do what they call, entrance interview, admissions interview through like alumni. So make sure that you're prepared, that you've done your research, that you know how to do an interview, that you practice with someone, because basically this interview is not going to get you accepted, but it can certainly influence if you're not, if you're denied. I have heard stories about, students that come not prepared, not looking well, don't know how to talk and conduct themselves. And basically this alumni, all they're doing is sussing you out to see like, will this be someone that I would have liked to have our campus? Are they going to fit in? So again, it's not going to be like the one thing that gets you accepted, but it definitely can be like an additional recommendation in your favor if you do really well. And one last thing is be original, be yourself. Don't try to sound like every other person that is applying to the Ivy League. Like, you don't have to cure cancer and save the world. Just you're 17, 18, maybe, you're still young. They don't expect you to be perfect. Be yourself, come through as original as you can be, because sounding like every other person in the application is not going to do you any favors. All right. So these are the things that you should really pay attention to, especially with top, selective and Ivy League applications. And I'm going to talk about those two other things that I said. Should you apply early? So before we go there are two cycles of applications. Actually, there's a few others, but I'm just going to focus on regular admissions and early applications. So early applications means early decision, early action. This cycle is usually around the 1st of November or the 15th of November of your application year, so your grade 12 year. So that will be when your application is due. And it's very important that you understand what it is. Early decision is basically you asking the university to marry you. So that's it. If they say yes and they accept you, you are happy, you're going to walk up to the sunset, and you're going to decline everyone else because it is a contract that you're entering with the university saying, if you admit me, I will come. So that is asking them to get married to you. Early action is asking it to go on a date. So you can apply early, and if you say yes, you can be super excited, but you can still date other people. You don't have to make a decision right away. So early decision is final. You get in, it's all, you're done with your applications. You can basically start shopping for your dorms and everything else and just kind of get prepared. Early action allows you to check to see whether you can still apply to others. Not every school offers early decision, early action. Like Harvard doesn't do early decision. They do what is called restrictive early action, where you apply to them early. They don't make you, commit, but you can only apply to them early. So there's little tricks that you need to be aware of what they do to kind of limit having bulk of applications of people that are not really serious about attending. And to give you some data about if this is something that is worth going to, if you look at the data from before, this here was the overall acceptance rate in the overall application. If you look at the early round, so for Brown, the early application round was 12%. That is way higher than that. Columbia was 11%, way bigger than 3.9. Cornell didn't share that information. Dartmouth was about 19%, which is against the 6% in the regular. 7.5% for Harvard against the 3.4, and so on and so forth. So yes, they do have some higher acceptance rates at these universities, but it depends again when you apply and if you're a good fit and so on. And not everybody should apply early because you need to make sure that you're really ready to commit and that you are going to be as competitive as the other people that are applying in that round. Okay. So again, touching on the importance of essays and supplements, especially because the academics are kind of like a given. So like you're applying to these schools, you're smart, it's kind of like, okay, right, we know that. It's going to come down to, well, how do you come across on paper? How do you express yourself? Do they feel like you are going to be a good fit? So making sure that you're doing really a good job with your essays, and especially those short supplement questions, why are you coming to us? They want to make sure that you are really doing your homework and that you're not just applying because of the brand name, because, they're Harvard or they're Columbia and so on, but because, that you really done your research. And one of the things that I always say to my students, like applying to places like NYU, it's like, do not talk about New York City unless you are going to be linking it to your program, because there are many universities in New York. So that could apply to, and could apply to Columbia if you talk about New York City. So do not make it about the city and do not tell them, how wonderful they are. They know they're wonderful. They know they have a great library. They know that they're reputable. They don't need to be educated about who they are. They want to know why you want to go there. So make sure that you really pay attention, to those essays, because that really is when they catch people out and they figure out like, well, who's just applying for the sake of, I want to come to a really great, name brand school, or who's really done their homework. So really, that's one of my tips that I share with you. All right, so we're almost coming to the end, and that is, should you apply to the Ivy League and other selective universities? And there are 3 questions that you need to ask yourself. The first one is, are you academically fit? So do you have the right academics to be applying to these universities? Are you in the top of your class? Are you getting those top academic grades? Because people that are applying to these universities are at that level. You have to think about your competition. So if you're not in that academic, class that they're looking for, then you should reconsider your list. The second thing is, do I fit the profile for the students who are applying there? Activities, community service, your basically your resume around what you do outside of the classroom. Are you a good fit for them? And the last thing, and this is like the most important thing, are you willing and able to dedicate the time that it's going to take for you to do a good application? Because it all comes down to having a good application and paying attention to detail. And for those students of you who are joining me from South Africa, you have a January to December calendar. Application season starts in August of your grade 12 year. That means that college essays and supplements are happening between August and November. Think about the early decision, early action cycle. That is prelims and finals. You're going to have to do this within this time, so you need to really make sure that you're going to be able to give this the time that it deserves, because otherwise you're wasting your time, you're stressing yourself out, and it's just not worth it to go through that. So, and those of you who are in a regular academic calendar in the US, again, projects in senior year, there's a lot happening. You need to be able to give this time, because if you're not going to do a good job, just save yourself the time. It's just not going to be good for you. And this comes to the next thing is, should you get help with selective university applications? And I'm going to tell you, I'm just going to sum it up to this. Everyone who's applying probably has someone helping them. Get help, because you are competing with top elite, applicants, and that are getting help with their essays, that are getting help with all kinds of things. So make sure that you are really putting on your best foot forward if you want to have a chance, at being considered to be admitted to these universities. I like to highlight that I am a private college counselor. I'm not an agency, it's just me. And that means that I take a very limited number of students every year for the application season. That's the only way that I'm able to give, my time and dedication to students to make sure that they put together a good application. And the one thing is, the way that I work is that we have a 3-step process, which is identifying the universities, making sure that what is the SAT scores, if you're going to be using them, and then completing applications. The second step is around college essays, helping your teachers with the recommendations. I do offer that service as part of what I do, because oftentimes, especially when my students in South Africa, the teachers are not aware of what is the strategy of the letter, and what they need to do and what they need to write. And remember, this is one of the times that they can talk about you as a student. So you want to make sure that they really not giving you a generic, letter that can go to anyone else, and making sure that you are writing good essays, completing applications on time and so on. And the last step is basically making sure that you are prepared for your interviews, that you are submitting your final results correctly, and ensuring that your counselor also sends them to, and then selecting the university applications, and whoever gives you an offer, like going over their office and making sure that you are choosing the right place. All right, so with that, we come to the last slide on this presentation, which is what is the next step. And there are basically 3 things that you can do at this point. The first one is, you can either book a free consultation with me. You can just go to my website, and there's a little button there that you can do a book a consultation, so I can answer questions more individually. You can either email me if you have any questions, and follow us on social media. I share a lot of tips and information. I have been visiting about 12 universities in the past 2 weeks, so I'm going to be sharing lots of videos there, so you can have a look and see, what we're doing and other tips that I can share. All right. And with that, we have come to the end, and we're going to open it up to questions and answers. I hope that you have enjoyed this and that it has been useful to you. And I look forward to seeing you soon.